Good evening, everyone. It is May 28th. We're here for a work session of the City Council. We're going to begin with public comment on non-agenda items. Any member of the public wishing to speak to the council on an item not on our agenda, go ahead and come forward in the room. Okay, seeing none, I will close public comment on non-agenda items, and then we're going to move into our work session for the evening, which is stormwater funding feasibility study. City Engineer, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Well, Mayor, members of council, thanks for letting us come before you tonight and give an update on our stormwater feasibility study that we've been working on. For tonight's presentation, we have our consultant who we've been working with, WSP, and Aaron Murray and Elizabeth Treadway will be giving the bulk of our presentation tonight. With that, I'll turn it over to them.
Welcome. And City Clerk, I'm not sure who iPhone is in our attendees list, but we're not taking public comment at this time, and I don't know if that's a council member or not, but if it is, change your name and we will know.
Or Mayor, if it's a counselor, if they could text me.
Please text, yeah, if that's a council member, go ahead and text the City Clerk, please. All right. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having us. To be back in front of you again. My name is Aaron Murray. I'm civil engineer here in Laramie, manage the local branch of WSP. I'll start us off and then I'll turn it over to Elizabeth Treadway to talk about the financial side of things. So have a brief agenda here. We're going to recap what we've done since we last talked, which was in February, and update you on the progress, including feedback from the third stormwater focus group meeting, which we had since we last talked. We'll go through the level of service recommendations in detail this time, including how we use those to build up the cost for the rate model. And then I'll turn it over to Elizabeth, who will talk about the draft cost model, how that was built, and the rate estimation. And then we'll talk about the next steps, and then hopefully get some good feedback and have a discussion. So just to recap, this is phase 2 of the stormwater funding feasibility study. In phase 1, as you recall from last time, we recognized there was a need for an increased level of service and stormwater management from the previous master plans. Over $100 million of capital improvements were identified, 30 million of those identified as high priority. Current staffing levels and funding levels are unable to provide proactive maintenance. And stormwater quality management is an issue due to current issues and potential future regulation. We did quantify the current expenditures on stormwater from the general fund, and we developed level of service menus that we showed you last time, a basic, medium, and high, and some approximate costs for a future stormwater program. We'll take that to the next level tonight. And we discussed drainage fees as a method to distribute that cost of a stormwater program amongst the property owners. So since we last talked in February, we have reviewed the feedback from the first, well, actually I guess this is from that discussion in February. We gave you the feedback from the first 2 focus group meetings, discussed those menus in kind of a generalized form for the level of service, and we discussed the following key policy questions. What operations should be funded by a drainage fee? Should it be capital? Should it be O&M? Should it be administrative? Should we incorporate credits into the rate policy? So that would be if a private owner has done some improvement that decreases flow or improves water quality, should they get a credit on their bill for that? What's the reasonable time period to construct those high priority projects? Do you want to get those done in the next 5 years, the next 10 years, the next 20 years? And should all properties pay, including the city itself, similar to the way that water and sewer fees are charged? So we did meet with the focus group meeting on April 4th for the 3rd time, and we summarized the detailed level of service breakdown that we'll show you in terms of the primary goals, what are the specific resources needed by the city, people hired or equipment bought, that kind of thing, and the desired outcomes from that level of service. And we reviewed a 5-year financial forecast incorporating the costs of those level of service in terms of personnel, direct equipment expenses, and capital expenditures. And then we described how we developed a draft rate based on the imperviousness, the amount of surfacing that cannot infiltrate water. on single-family home parcels and how we convert that to a billing unit, and we'll cover that today as well. Describe the cash flow analysis, including the use of a reserve fund so that we have a rate that stays constant, but maybe we initially can't construct the projects in year one because we need to have some designed. So we may have a capital reserve that gets big, and then we have projects that are ready to be built, and then that gets expended. So we talked about the use of reserve funds, and we'll cover that a little more today. And we discussed a preliminary range of rates per single family home per month to get some initial feedback. So the feedback we got from the focus group, and we have a really good group, I have to say, they're very engaged. They're excited to be there. A lot of times the challenge is, ending the discussion on one topic so we can get through to the next one. On the level of service, one of the comments we got from several members is residents will need to see that the funds generated are providing benefits, typically in the form of reduced flooding. They talked about, certain areas of town that people are familiar with flooding, and they want to see, okay, is that being improved? And the outcomes should be measurable, specific, and reported to the public so that people know what they're paying for. On the financial model, we had questions about how the impervious area will be determined, how will it be measured? And we talked about that the city, I think last month or maybe even in April, flew a new aerial. They'll have new mapping, which will include measuring the impervious areas. They asked if a higher rate could be charged for land uses more likely to contribute pollution to stormwater. And we talked about how typically that's not done. That's more of a policy thing rather than something done via a stormwater rate. One of the common comments was that underserved areas may provide resistance if they're not seeing the benefits. So areas that don't have stormwater system now would say, hey, what am I paying for? I don't have any storm inlets, any curb and gutter, that kind of thing. So we talked about that. And it will be important to explain, they felt, what's going to be done with the general fund dollars that used to be spent on stormwater once an enterprise fund would be initiated. And we discussed a preliminary rate, very rough range of rate to get their feedback, and all members felt that was reasonable. Some said, hey, if we're getting this service, I'd be happy to pay it. We have a very engaged group. Some were on their laptops pulling up rates from around the country and during the meeting saying, okay, yeah, that seems comparable to this town. It's way less than this town. So kind of already doing a comparison. There was a question about, is there a program to assist residents or say small businesses that may have trouble paying the fee? And staff did provide, what's currently done on the water and sewer side in instances like that. And one of the questions was, have stormwater fees been a disincentive for businesses? And so Elizabeth took that one and can expand on that if needed, but really it's not something that's been seen as an issue there. Business decisions are based on things other than that. Typically, and the feedback we got from the members on the committee there, say on the Economic Development Corporation, said things like businesses want to see communities with good infrastructure. That's what they're really concerned about. They don't mind requirements if they're clearly defined. Let's see. So we showed you this last time. This is that generalized menu of the different level of service areas of a stormwater program and how working with staff and based on your feedback, where each area would start and what it would hope to get to, defining it as basic, medium, and high. And so tonight we'll dive into what does medium mean in terms of staff that need to be hired or construction projects that are constructed. So if we go to asset management and system inspection, the plan is to start at a medium level of service and then ramp up to high. And you'll notice when we go to O&M that it tracks the same. These two aspects are intertwined. The inspection goes hand in hand with the O&M. But the primary goals are, we want to maintain an inventory of the system in GIS, so we're inspecting it, but we're logging that so that the city can pull up and know what the status of their system is, know where the weak spots are, know where the areas that are likely to fail next are, and maintain that an annual inspection program. Really, the big thing is that number 4 under primary goals is to shift from a reactive, we're just addressing the problem that occurred in the last flood, to a proactive, we identified what's going to fail next and we can take action before it does fail. One of the ways to do that is to maintain an ongoing sweeping program, maintain an ongoing inspection program. The resources that are needed to do that include, in year 1, hiring 4 public works operators. In year 2, buying new closed circuit TV camera equipment to do those inspections to replace the old equipment that they currently have. GIS support for that inventory that I mentioned, that will come from the public works engineering side with hires we'll talk about on that side. And then increasing tools, supplies, fuels, equipment to handle that additional workload. So hopefully the outcome is the entire system is inspected on a 5-year rotating cycle. So you finish year 5, year 6, you start with what you inspected in year 1, so that you always know what your system is doing. Dedicated street sweeping program from spring to fall. That's going to help with sustaining the capacity of the pipe network so that at least what you have is fully functioning by keeping all that debris, leaves, sediment out of the pipe. That will also help with stormwater quality issues in the Laramie River, as that everything you take out through a street sweeper is not ending up in the creek. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Please, Councilor Doherty.
Can you remind us of how many miles of, or is that going to come up somewhere? Like when you talk about the maintenance and 5-year rotating cycle, can you remind us how many miles of sewer, storm sewer we have in Laramie? Or
Off
never?
the top of my head, it is. Well,
I
don't
can
know.
find out
It's
from
on the order of magnitude
this
of
report.
like 100 miles. It's,
Okay,
yeah, it's a lot.
all right, thank you.
I don't know, Eric, if you know off the top of your head now.
Looking it up.
Yeah, Brooks had it.
Thank you, Director Webb.
Yep.
All right, back to you, Aaron. Thank you.
Okay. So moving on to operation and maintenance, again, it's very similar because these are the same folks that are doing the asset management, shifting from reactive to proactive. Want to maintain capacity for that dedicated stormwater maintenance program through those new hires, street sweeping, and have materials equipment in place to support ongoing operations. So what that means is if they're through these inspections are problems that the city can solve themselves. So we've talked through the staff and said, well, if the pipes are, say, 24 inches or smaller, we can use our own people, our own equipment, and we can repair that right away. So maintaining, kind of taking some of that capital program dollars and just doing it ourselves on those small problem areas that we find every year, the stuff we don't know about right now. The resources are they're the same people that we talked about on the last slide under the asset management side, those 4 public works operators, the CCTV equipment, et cetera. Also having increased materials and supplies for those minor repairs, so it may mean having some of those smaller pipe sizes in stock, making sure we have the right equipment, the right size of backhoe to do that. But we specifically talk with staff to make sure, okay, at what point does it become a piece of equipment that you don't have or don't want to spend to deal with large diameter pipes, box culverts, that kind of thing, that they'll leave to the construction contractor community.
Councilor Richardson, please.
Thank you. When we're talking about staffing, would there be a need to upfront have an increased staff? Or once you jump into a project like this, does it stay pretty steady? You have the 4 shown up front and then ongoing, but would there be, do you ever see it where it is an increased need up front due to the initial kind of startup?
Right, yeah, good question. So with that, and this, deciding that it's going to be a medium level of service, this kind of gets you to that medium level of service to carry you through that first 5 years, but it's always subject to reevaluation, saying, hey, we're not keeping up, maybe we need to make another hire, maybe we need to adjust the rate. But the idea is that will get us through that first 5-year period, because it's going to be, we're going to just stick to that 5-year rotating cycle, and so that's the staff needed to do that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Councilor Newman.
From year 5 to year 10, when does it switch to high? Because it goes from medium, 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 and then year 10's high. Where's that
It's-
split? Do you know?
It's probably a gradual thing, like 7, 8, I don't know if, yeah, Elizabeth has it in the model, but yeah, somewhere in that time frame. It's not exactly in year 6, but yeah, for the ease of showing it on the slide, yeah, we kind of constricted that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Get back to you.
Okay. So one of the resources is to initiate water quality monitoring program at public system outfalls. And that was something that did come out of the focus group is, you know, if we know the Laramie River is impaired, but do we know exactly where the problem is and how much are we contributing versus maybe upstream agricultural sources and things like that. And so we wanted to put something in there, and that, you know, exactly isn't defined. The exact program really isn't defined, but it probably started at a basic level of, hey, let's take some grab samples during storm events at large outfalls to the Laramie River and see what's going on during storm events. So just so we can start to understand, is there a certain part of town we need to focus resources on where say sediment may be coming more than other areas, that kind of thing. And so that's on the outcomes, is water quality improvements can be targeted based on those results. A lot of the outcomes are similar to the asset management, but really, you know, it's longevity and the productivity of the equipment. You have limited downtime. It's longevity of not just the pipe system, but also the equipment when you're using it regularly, maintaining it, and you're not just letting it sit over the winter and then starting it up again. You tend to see a longer lifetime for the city's equipment. Item 3 under the outcomes is that those minor repairs that I was talking about, the increased capacity to do that. And the dollar figure that the city staff felt is, if it's under $1 million and the smaller pipe size, something they may be able to do. So probably like, you know, a block size problem, not a large trunk line, but we got an issue, we found we can handle it in-house. So moving on to the engineering and planning, and you'll see this kind of dovetails with the following slide of the capital improvements, because it's the engineering and planning people that are overseeing the capital improvements. We start at the basic level and then move to a medium level. And really the reason for that is, one, there's not projects that are already designed and ready to be constructed in year 1, so there needs to be a ramp up of the design, and there's not staff ready to oversee and inspect those projects. So we want to make sure we have the capacity to oversee the implementation, and also the staff needs to be able to do all the things they're already doing in the areas of water, sewer, streets. Engineering folks wear a lot of hats, so they need to keep doing that, and then these are the added staff to help take on the additional workload. Develop policy and design standards for the storm sewer systems, something that the city is already working on, as well as designing standards for the use of green infrastructure to help with the water quality aspect. And maintain the support services to the development community. So that's one of the things the city is already doing, but being able to help the development committee with any new requirements, helping them understand if there's, you know, a credit program, because typically the development community is building those things, even though the owner is going to be the one that's going to get the stormwater bill or get the stormwater credit. So maintaining that development review capacity. How to do that is, year 1, add an engineering technician, and that person is probably going to be handling a lot of the GIS inventory that's going to come out of the inspection program initially. Then they'll probably be doing a lot of inspection once projects start getting constructed. Year 2, and these are both full-time positions, year 2, add a full-time engineer. Additional inspection services may need to be contracted depending, because as I mentioned, due to the size of the projects, it's going to fluctuate based on what goes on in a given year. So you may have a high workload one year, maybe they need to add some contract inspection that year, and maybe they don't the next year. And then providing the vehicles, supplies, computers, safety equipment, everything that goes with adding city employees, including office setups. So the outcome is we're continuing to provide that development review and overview and management, increasing the number of capital projects, so working down through that high priority project list, supporting the expansion of green infrastructure with the goal of improving water quality, and then increasing the drainage system capacity so that ultimately we can show reduced flooding in those areas that everybody sees flood frequently and show that benefit. Capital projects you see follows the same, for the same reasons, follows the year 1 and year 2 at basic before ramping up to medium through year 10. And what that means in terms of dollars is targeting an annual investment of $4 million in capital projects each year to start buying down that high priority project list. So that gets it in about, it's less than 10 years to get that $30 million done. It's 7-8 years, so you start getting into some of the medium priority projects, which are still important projects. They just didn't quite score as high. Maybe flooding wasn't as bad in those areas, but you can start getting into those at the end of the 10-year period. We want to maximize the currently available capital funding. So that includes things like obtaining grants for projects, especially that are over that $2 million, so that the burden of those doesn't fall to the ratepayer. Take advantage to the extent possible for any grants. Potentially issuing bonds. If there's specific purpose taxes, using that. So kind of using all the resources currently available to lessen the burden on the ratepayer. And then really extend the life of the existing system. The city right now spends about $150,000 a year on pipelining to extend the life of those existing systems, because really that's the part we don't know is how long those are going to last. And we're going to continue in this cost model to fund the pipelining at that same amount, so that program will continue. All of the resources are the same as we talked about. It's the same technician, full-time engineer, resources and supplies, because they're the people overseeing the capital projects. They're also going to provide training of the staff and education of the engineering community on green infrastructures. That's a new thing for the construction community, the development community. So making sure that the community understands how they're designed, how they need to be constructed so that they function, and how they need to be maintained. The last one that's kind of hard to see under the text there is to periodically update the existing model. The city has a model of the stormwater system, but it's only as good as the current status of it. So periodically updating as things are constructed, as things are improved, so that that model can be useful going forward as a tool. The outcomes of this, hopefully reduce neighborhood flooding, hopefully underserved areas have improved drainage or have drainage systems so they don't have it, if they don't have it any at all. And then target those repair and rehab projects. Target those based on that system-wide data, so that if you identify something that's not in the capital improvement project, it's list and it's too big for the city to do on their own, we need to target that, put it into the priority list so the city will have the flexibility to do that. And then finally, the admin and customer service. There we're starting at a basic level, ramping up to medium, and ultimately getting to high. Really, this is where the financial accounting is done. We want to make sure that's done properly, and the reporting to the community on the overall goals and accomplishments. Customer service and billing administration, a big part of that, and periodically updating the user rates as things change. Construction costs change, or maybe the maintenance you want to increase the maintenance, or maybe you want to decrease certain things. The resources for that, initially the thought is to contract for necessary assistance during the implementation, kind of the initial implementation. it's really not seen as a long-term need. So just getting through that initial kind of ramp up and then use current staff. The master account file data, that is going to be handled on the public works engineering side. So, okay. So the actual account data that says, okay, this property has this many billing units because it has this much impervious area, that's handled on the engineering side, so it's not an additional load on the billing side. The billing then file will be transferred over to the billing staff. So a lot of the effort is on the engineering side, which kind of makes sense because when people have questions about their bill, they would call the engineering side who would be able to say, okay, yeah, it's because you have, your house and this shed and this deck, or you added this parking lot, to kind of go through the engineering aspects of the impervious area measurements with the customer. And so they'll have that database, so it's not an additional load on the customer service side. So hopefully the outcomes are measurable financial outcomes, like passing an audit, like the reserve funds are operating in the black, the rates are providing enough revenue to meet the level of service, and providing a high level of customer service when people are calling, their questions are getting answered, directed to the right person who has the answer, and then informing community leaders and public works on the performance, how many pounds of sediment were taken out by the street sweeping program, how many miles of pipe were cleaned, that kind of thing, how many feet of pipe were lined, which projects are coming up, which projects have been completed, that kind of thing. So any questions on the level of service?
Councilors, any questions? Looks like we have an answer on miles.
Yes.
Thank you, Director
So
Webb.
I wasn't too far off. 128 miles of of stormwater mains and 1,098 stormwater inlets.
Well,
And I think there's about somewhere around 600 manholes as well. So it's pretty big system.
So what's needed?
go ahead, Councilor Pierce,
So
please.
what's needed? Because I know there's some parts of town with like nothing, right? So not where,
Right.
but do we have an estimate on what we lack?
We do. Through the master planning process, we have, specifically in West Laramie's area where there's not much infrastructure. The city just completed construction of the first trunk line in that area that now has an outfall to get to the Laramie River. And so follow-on projects will now tie into that. But I don't have the number on how many miles that is, but there are the projects that will come with that. For example, I guess the next one would be Wyoming Avenue is slated to be paved possibly next year, and now that has a place to go. There'll be a small storm sewer system that'll connect into the new trunk line, and so those are programmed. Part of the challenge that comes with that is you want to pave those streets as well, and so it'll be kind of working in conjunction with stormwater fees, paying for the stormwater portion, and planning other fees to handle the roadway portion. But yeah, that 128 will grow
Right.
probably another 10, 15 miles, maybe just in West Laramie.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Pierce. Any other questions, council members? Okay.
If not, then I will turn it over to Elizabeth, who will go through the financial forecast.
Thank you, Aaron. Elizabeth, welcome.
So I get to tell you the fun part of this, right?
Everyone's favorite.
I know, it's count up the dollars. When we met with you before, we talked in general about how we go about doing the financial forecast itself. And so one of the questions, as Aaron reminded you, that we asked was, what are the services that should be taken into consideration? And so we built the financial model addressing all of the operations necessary to provide ongoing services, to address the capital construction costs. So we're talking about the basics of operating costs, personnel, capital improvements, everything that you would think of in running a stormwater business from that perspective. All of that was taken into consideration as we built the model. So it is comprehensive. The projection is meant to address, and I'm going to show you right now what the first 5 years looks like. You can see that we are variable from year to year. As Aaron shared with you, we use the capital reserve fund to hold rates on a consistent basis by making contributions into the fund and withdrawing it. So it becomes a balancing tool. It's interest earning, obviously, as well. But the idea is to provide stability to not only the program, but the ratepayer, so that there's an expectation not only of what's getting constructed, but that their financial involvement is also on a consistent basis. So we would not be proposing rates that go up and down and up and down. There's nothing worse, especially in the business industry, of not being able to forecast what your responsibilities are. And so though you see that capital variability, when we built the actual projection for the rates themselves, we used that capital fund as a balancing tool. And so we worked with Jennifer building the financial factors of how to create that fund, how to manage it over the period. And we'll talk about those rates in just a moment. I want to remind you of how then the rate structure that we talked with you about before is established. Aaron referred to using the residential impervious area as a basis for the billing unit. This is industry practice. It's occurring all over the United States, Canada, where rates are established on the basis of a comparison or an equivalency to residential properties. So once we gather all of the impervious area, we do an analysis that makes all properties equated to residential properties. So to do that, we need to understand then what is the housing stock, what is the impervious area that's within your residential properties. And we have been working through that analysis. This simply shows you a histogram of the distribution. It's a nice bell curve. If there wasn't a nice bell curve, we would be talking with you about a different way to approach that rate structure. But because you have consistency in your housing stock, we can use the residential relationship in order to create the billing unit rate for all other properties. In this case, the median value is, again, industry standard as a consistent factor to use. 2,840 square feet is the median impervious area on residential properties within the community. So we set the billing unit in square footage to that number. We then look at all the other properties, and we look for consistency then in the billing unit distribution. So if there's a business that also has 2,840 square feet of impervious area, it too would be assigned a single billing unit. So we take large properties like Walmart and we figure out this looks more like, and we have not done this math, so I'm making this up, just make sure everyone knows, but it would be like 30 houses could fit on that property. And that way we translate the billing unit into something the public can understand. That gas station looks like 2 houses. That strip mall looks like 7 houses. That it's a concept that we use in public education, not only to to help the public perceive what this is, but to also help the public understand my home versus the Walmart, that there is proportional distribution of these costs, that we're building in equity by using that residential rate factor as a method to help folks understand, visually perceive. We can do some really great graphics, and it's a great tool not only to build that fairness in the distribution, but to build understanding to the community of how those rates were established as well. So I wanted to just remind you of how that factor came about. So we take all those costs that Aaron talked about. What is spent currently? What are we projecting as needs over time? In all of those cost areas, administration, operations, maintenance, engineering, all of those areas. And I build a cash flow analysis, because in the end, it's cash we need to raise. And so we take a very business profile. What are our expenses? What are our other offsetting revenues? We talk about grants, we talk about loans, we talk about interest earnings, we talk about recovery of delinquencies. We take all of those into effect, and we net those from total cost. That tells us then what's not covered yet. What do we need to raise in additional expenditures? And so by following this simple profile of math, ins and outs, we are then able to establish what is the amount of money that we need to raise using the user fees to get there. So we've taken all the other revenues into consideration. We've taken total expenditures, and we're able then, with a billing unit count, to calculate the rates over time. So following the fundamental principles that we set up, that all services will be covered, that we need to be sure that we pursue other revenues using grants and loans when it's appropriate, and most appropriately when we're trying to level out that capital variability over time, as project values change over time. We want to make sure that there's a reasonableness in the flow of cash and other revenues in managing the fund over time. So we follow those, we look at all of the important other elements, operating reserves, emergency reserves, managing the capital reserve. It's all a part of building the cash flow ultimate goal of what the rates need to be. We, as I said, we also work with staff. There's important financial policy that we've taken into consideration. We were guided by staff in these particular funding factors. One of the things that we were given as a potential goal is to kickstart the fund with a contribution from the general fund. Obviously, that's not our decision. That's an ultimate decision in how the financial structure would be created. But in order to estimate the rates over time, that was one of the factors that we took into consideration, that there would be a one-time contribution from the general fund to start building that capital reserve, most importantly, in order to keep the rates smooth. We also projected then the use of bonds in FY 28 and 29. We projected out the use of grants, and this was really triggered by that variability in the capital projects. So we took all of those into considerations. Where they have really large projects, in this case, we cite the Jacoby project, something in the neighborhood of $12 million. That's going to take time to be able to build that into the actual construction schedule. That's a very significant project in single dollars in a single project. And so that will have to be built into the forecast over time. We would set this up initially as a special revenue fund, and we would make sure that we took into consideration all of the kinds of policies that influence the rate projections. So one of the things we've talked with you about that we will continue to discuss with our focus group is the use of credits for those private investments that have been made that are serving a public good. So we have a lot of factors here. I would turn to Jennifer to ask if there's anything you'd like to add to that at this point. I'm putting her on the spot, by the way.
There are maybe just two things.
Okay, absolutely, absolutely.
Director Wade, welcome.
Thank you. I just want to note the city manager's recommendation to kickstart what would be a special revenue fund, not an enterprise fund, with a $5 million infusion of cash that we are able to contribute because of our one-time sales and use tax collection. So I think as our governing body, it's really important that you understand that that's her recommendation and where that money is coming from. I also would note that we are projecting $6 million in bonding from a future specific purpose tax. So that would, of course, rely on voter support for stormwater initiatives in that tax. It's a great way to shield the ratepayers from that impact. And Councilmember Shumway would be familiar with that approach, as we also used specific purpose tax when we were kickstarting the enterprise funds for water and wastewater. That's all from a governing body perspective.
Director Wade, while you're still here, can you tell me the difference, this might be a simple question, but difference between an enterprise fund and a specific revenue fund, sort of like what the meaningful differences might be?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So a special revenue fund does not have to be self-sustaining. So if we were to make the stormwater utility an enterprise fund, it means it stands alone. The general fund does not support it. And we staff are not recommending to you that we manage it as a full-up enterprise fund now. Maybe 10 years from now, in that 7 to 10 year range, we change. We certainly only have the one-time general fund contribution, and if things are going well and it's the council's will, we can transition that to a full enterprise fund. But right now, we are making the assumption that you might want to support it with other governmental revenue sources and not only its own source revenue.
And that would mean, from a public point of view, likely a lower cost
Correct.
monthly to go this route.
Absolutely.
Okay,
That's part of the,
great.
yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Councilors, other questions? Yeah, Vice Mayor, please.
I'm just curious, credit policies for recognition of private investments. What would be an example of that?
We often see the credit programs that are adopted focus on aligning an activity, an investment on private property that supports the objectives of managing the public system. So in a case where there is a structure built on private property that is reducing peak flow rates, so that you're not getting a rush of water all at one time, but it allows control of peak flow over time. Or reducing volume, or trapping sediment, things that have measurable value to protecting the public system and have been made by private concerns.
And something beyond just increasing sort of your impervious area, right?
Well, one of the strategies, obviously, is you can remove impervious area. That's not a credit. You
Right, you
actually
would just
see
get
your
it
bill go
reduced,
down because you don't have as much impervious area anymore.
Okay.
But certainly anything that can improve or support the objectives of managing the public system is typically the target of a credit program.
Thank you. All right.
And we'll be discussing that with the focus group. That policy has not been finalized.
Great.
Okay?
Back to you.
So, where are we on a financial analysis? Again, using the billing unit value at 2840 square feet as one billing unit, setting the residential rate as one billing unit. So on an annualized basis, the residents would be billed one billing unit. We ran the financial model with the factors that we just talked about that Jennifer also added additional detail to, that for the first 5 years, right now, we don't have the final number, but we're in a range starting out at between $6 and $8.50 a month. That translates to 72 and 102, I think is what that number on an annualized basis. It does have a slow growth over time because things, number one, will cost more, as we've all learned personally, but also we are expanding services over time as well. So as we become more efficient in some of the services we can provide, we're able to make sure that, as Aaron pointed out, the public system is running as efficiently as it can. And so there is a slight growth, an increase over time that we built into the model. These are not final numbers. This is where we are at this point in being able to run the model itself. It's been reviewed, again, great input from staff in helping us put the model together, but it gives you a sense of where we're starting on a per household basis, but also then a per billing unit basis.
Councilor Newman, please.
How many people are on the focus group?
I'm sorry?
How many people are on the focus group?
Oh, my goodness, 20, maybe? Something like that?
Yeah, second question. How do apartments fit into this?
Apartments would be considered non-residential. They are a business. And so typically, if you were charging it for each unit, think of an apartment complex, often multi-storied. You only care about the footprint of the whole building, not how many repetitive, built on top of each other residents there are. So when looking at apartment complexes, it's much more cost-effective to the owner that we're just looking down at that footprint, not counting up how many people are inside it. And we've done lots of analysis on this kind of thing with utilities all over the country. It is typically always to the advantage of the owner for us to treat not each unit as a billing unit, but the footprint of the building as the basis of the billing unit. That's the same way that the impact on a tall hotel, 4 or 5-story hotel, we only care really from the basis of impervious areas looking down on it, not what's in it, not how many floors are in it, not what is its value. And again, multi-story buildings usually are ones that benefit from that rate analysis of what a bird sees flying over versus counting up livable space within the building structure. Same way with the home, whether it's 2-story or 3-story or 1-story, it's the building footprint that matters.
Thank you, Councilor Newman. Vice Mayor, please.
I just wanted to clarify something. With the residential rate, would that be the same for all residential structures or billing?
Yes.
So whether,
On the way the rate is set up right now, the answer to that is yes.
so if you had a tiny home on a tiny lot, you'd pay the same as a big home on a big
Yes.
lot? Okay.
Now, that is a policy decision to be made. Once we have all of the impervious area data, we'll be in much better position to come back to you to say, we think you should separate your residential so that a small, and this is hypothetical, but a small footprint may pay a half a billing unit. And a very large residential property with a lot of impervious area may pay a billing unit and a half, until we can do that final analysis, which we are anxious to get all of that information. We're not in a position to say to you, that's the best approach we think in treating how you look at your residential properties. It is not uncommon for a tiering of residential rates to be taken into consideration. The critical thing will be the data that we receive and the analysis that we can do once we have all that data in hand.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Other questions, council, while we're paused? Okay. Back to you.
So, what is our role from the next steps? As I just said, that impervious area data is going to be coming to us. We're anticipating in the next 45 days or so. That will give us the tool now to finalize the analysis on a property-by-property basis, not only for residentials, but for the non-residentials, so that we can refine the billing unit analysis and the count on the billing units. So where we just talked about showing you a range of rates, we are anticipating that that number is going to fluctuate, the number of billing units. And so we didn't want to give you a value. We wanted you to understand, we know there's going to be some shifting once we can analyze all that data. So that's critical to us. We will then update the rate model. We will finalize the process of how a bill can get out the door so that we can explain the operations. And then one of the roles that we play is to support drafting an ordinance going forward, should it be your decision to move this into an actual method for financing your stormwater program. So we have some important work over the summer to get done. And if Brooks would come forward right at the moment, he's got a lot more details about dates and when things will happen, and the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Welcome back, Director Webb.
Thanks. Yeah, Mayor, Council, I'll just talk real quick about kind of next steps and timelines. So what we're doing right now is, as you know, as you've heard, the aerial's been completed. They've flown everything. They've got the data, and now they're putting that all together. They're working with our engineers in-house to get that impervious area finalized and get that information to us. That's like Elizabeth said, that's what we're all waiting for, right? That's what's really going to matter. On July 11th, we have our fourth and probably final focus group meeting. We're going to talk to them about the credit program and discussing the final rate structure. We'll be working on drafting that credit policy program and appeals process. We'll be drafting ordinance language with rates for a work session in late August, early September is the plan. And then ordinance first reading, we're looking at late October, early November, so that we can have everything adopted before the end of the year. It's been our goal all along. And then after adoption, we've got some work to do as far as developing with the billing system, integration with the billing system, finalizing that credit policy, and finalizing the impervious areas. So the adoption, we're hoping to have at the end of this year, but implementation would be later in fiscal year '25, so that we have time to work through that process. It's a lot of work, and so a lot of that work shouldn't necessarily be done until the ordinance is adopted, if that makes sense. So later in fiscal year '25, I would see at the latest a year from adoption to when the program's actually implemented. So with that, the full team is here if you have any further questions.
Thank you, Director Webb. Council members, what questions are coming up for you right now?
I have no questions, I just have comments.
Hold on with comments for a second. Director Webb, if nobody else has questions, I got a few. I'm wondering how you've contemplated sort of that first note in the focus groups about sort of demonstrating the benefits of this fund to the public. I think when you look at the 10-year plan, I feel like the capital portion is how you demonstrate it, right? Like if people see movement in their streets, they can see like, oh, the pipe went in, that's the thing we're all paying for. As that moves from sort of like a high to a medium priority over time, have you all thought through like how you might continue to demonstrate that? I think the street sweeping program is great. I mean, I have had a lot of questions about why the street sweeper doesn't come around all the time. So I think that's part of that, right? But have you all thought through that on your end?
Yeah, somewhat. So, okay. Mayor, with the program that we've laid out, I mean, those street sweepers will be running all the time. We basically dedicate two folks to street sweeping all the time. But some of the ways we've thought about showing that progress is through our GIS system. So we actually have trackers on our sweepers. And so when someone says that sweeper's never been down my street, we can tell them what day and what time it went down their street. And we're looking at making that GIS public facing so people can actually look and see, oh, okay, the street sweeper, here's where the street sweeper's going, right? And also with a schedule where they can see it. We also talked about, and it's the maintenance side where it's hard to show, right? You're right, with the capital, it's pretty easy. We just got our new vac truck in last week. The guys are so excited. And they've started doing a lot of camera work. One of the things we've talked about doing is with the GIS, showing the lines that we've cameraed and the lines that we've cleaned and making that public facing so people can actually see that. And so for us, it's really sharing with the public what we're doing more and making that more public facing. There's probably a bunch of other ideas, but those are the ones that right now that we've talked about. I think as the program evolves, what we share with the public and how we show that will evolve also.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I'm sure there are, like you said, a million other ways that this will come. But I like all of the ideas you mentioned, so I'm glad to hear that. I think those are great. And then I was curious about how this fund will balance sort of like, I mean, I think the council's quite familiar with maybe like 60% of our infrastructure investment is in West Laramie, right? Like, but the entirety of the town. I mean, and I say that because I think probably something quite similar makes sense in this fund. West Laramie, sort of like North 4th Street, there are some specific parts of town that have more substantial flooding issues, and I know they exist in other parts of town. But with the entire community paying into this fund, how we manage that part.
Yeah, so I mean, we work off the master plan, right? And we have projects and they're prioritized. And so that's what we work off. But I will say, one of the things we've talked through is when this fund comes in, that may tweak a little bit because now we've got to line up those projects that we have funding for with our street projects and our water and sewer projects, right? Right now, a lot of those projects that we do on streets and stuff, we do minimal storm work just because we don't necessarily have the funding for it. So we have the master plan with a priority list, but that could tweak a little bit depending on what other projects are occurring in that area, right? So if we decide we're going to go and we're going to pave another street over in West Laramie, then we got to get the storm drainage in, right? So that's going to be a lot of work in our office to make sure we integrate all those projects together.
Yeah, I don't envy that at all. That sounds like a lot to juggle.
It's fun.
Councilors, any other questions for Director Webb? Director Wade, I had one question for you, and that was just about our grant funding. And because we're relying on it to some extent in this model, is it predictable enough to be reliable?
So Honorable Mayor, I'd like to tell you about the fun we had. We spent an entire afternoon, and by we, I mean Director Webb, Deputy Director Klein, City Engineer Japp, and City Manager Jordan. And we played with these grant assumptions. We actually had lower grant revenue in at the beginning. And then Director Webb reminded us that we had some pretty major applications that he feels very good about. And so we chose the most major of those applications for $12.5 million, and then put conservative assumptions in the out years. And so the funding assumptions we're using are our current best guess, not being too conservative, meaning loading too much revenue, but also not skimping and passing along too much rate to the ratepayer. And I think that's something that we with water and wastewater, we got a lot of grant funding, and so we got to hold those rates back longer. With this fund, what we'd like to try to do is find that sweet spot from the beginning and charge the least that we can, assuming that the council agrees with our recommendation that it's best to implement this fund as a special revenue fund, particularly because that gives us the additional flexibility of general fund support if we do need it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate that. Councilors, other questions? Okay. I'm going to go to the public on this work session. If there's any member of the public that wishes to speak to this, go ahead and raise your hand on the Zoom call or come forward in the room. All right, seeing no public comment, I'll close that. Staff, is there anything you want to leave us with? Either of you, anything, any parting words? Okay. Sounds like we'll be seeing you all soon anyway. So, all right, council members, we're going to go ahead and close the work session for the evening.
Comments.
I was just closing this specific work session. You mean, council comments? All right, fair enough, folks. Thanks, everybody. Councilor Pierce, Councilor Newman.
Thanks. I certainly understand the reason for having a special revenue fund in the beginning. I mean, I think that makes sense to me, but it also makes sense to me that over time, it will transition to more of a enterprise type fund or functionality, I guess, if that's at all possible. And in terms of community support, they supported the last 6-cent tax, and we had all over that stormwater drainage project. So we are fortunately living in a community that absolutely understands our need, given our hilly nature and our flooding that we so often see depending on the storm that we're having. So I really do appreciate that. And the other thing I think we need to potentially put on the website and maybe even have a conversation about, because I'm not 100% convinced it's a good idea, but it wasn't that many years ago that the legislature passed the ability of municipalities to do this. So I think making our community aware, if they do get concerned, they need to understand that the legislature grants us the ability to do this. So I think that might be an important thing to fall back on in terms of, where and how this all started and why it all started. Because, we are not alone here in Laramie with issues like this. And I think statewide there are many issues associated with this that, became very obvious to the legislature and the need for some sort of revenue stream. So I think they perhaps need to be reminded of that. And frankly, I realize those aren't the final numbers for the rate, but from where I was thinking in my head, it's better than I ever expected it would be. So I'm kind of excited about that and frankly surprised, right? And I don't know if it's just the front loading of some of the funds, but I think it's good, and I think if we need to add a few more dollars to that based on projects and our priority list of projects, because when I see 130 million in projects and only 30 million in priority, it kind of makes me a little nervous that we're not pushing a little harder, but I also understand capacity at supply and the roads projects and coordinate everything, so that makes sense. I'm sure you guys all thought about that, but anyway, and thank you for all your work on this, because I've been sitting in this chair for a long time and waiting for a while for this, so I'm thrilled that we're as far as we are. So thanks to everybody.
Thank you, Councilor.
Who's worked on that.
Thank you, Councilor Pierce. Yeah, it has been a minute. I would say the bill signing for that was the last thing I did before the world shut down for the pandemic. That was the last public event I went to. So it's been at least that long.
Yeah.
Councilor Newman?
So I get made fun of because I bring up my hometown a lot, but I'm going to again, and I'm sure my email is going to get blown up. Right. And it's funny because, we'll talk about something that they have passed 2 years ago. So their stormwater rates went into effect the beginning of this year. And I'm going to say they're doing it better than us. And the reason why I'm going to say that is I could have a 3,000 square foot house and pay the same as a small dense house, right? I would rather see, something, the way they have it broke up is under 1,000 square feet pays X amount, and then instead of, everybody paying the same amount, because it just seems ridiculous if I'm going to build a huge house and pay the same as somebody who has, a tiny home. If I owned the tiny home, I'd be kind of mad, per se, so. That's just what I have to say. I'm not a fan of the one rate.
Thank you, Councilor Newman. Other comments, council members? Councilor Shumway, please go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is something I commented about when it first was introduced, and I just want to make some more comments. 40 years ago when I moved here, I didn't pay for mosquitoes, and I didn't pay for recycling. And now we're talking about stormwater. And by the way, I support all three. I supported mosquitoes, I support recycling, and I will support this. But I don't think we should ask the users to take the burden that is being proposed here. What I think is the burden of this should go on the state of Wyoming. They've got $20 billion they don't know what to do with. I do. I know what to do with it, yeah. And also, I think it's a responsibility for us, for those people that have lived here for 100 years, and there's only one or two that I know of, they never paid for stormwater runoff. So E.G. Meyer, you've been a lucky guy for 102 years. But here's something else that's going to come up. Once we introduce this, and we will, and I'll support it, and I think hopefully we can put as soft a landing as we possibly can on the citizens, then here are some of the things that are going to come up next. We're going to ask for snow removal. We're going to ask for street sweeping. We're going to ask for pothole maintenance. We're going to ask for streets and city signs. And then way in the future, we're going to start saying we're going to pay for climate change and air quality and all those things, and there'll be more bills added on bills on bills. I think well, let me give you one example, and then I'll be quiet. Los Angeles last year paid $3 billion for homelessness. This year, they're proposing $13 billion for homelessness. We pay nothing, but the day may come when we have to pay for homelessness, and that'll be another fee that we add on the fees that we add on fees. So I think we need to make sure we do everything we can as a council to make this as soft a landing as we can, but by all means, let's get this stormwater problem solved.
Thank you, Councilor Shumway. Councilor O'Doherty.
I'd like to make a public prediction that I don't think our legislature will ever let us do a fee for for climate change. But I'm really glad that our folks are so smart to come up with this plan, because it does scare the heck out of me, because so we just had CSBG meeting today, finding out what all the agencies need, like our block grant stuff that we do, and they need more money and we can't provide it, and a lot of it is homelessness, is housing. And so I agree with Councilor Newman about that if I build a mega mansion with more frontage, which means that's more storm sewer along my house compared to somebody that has less frontage, and then 3 or 4 houses share the same length of pipe, I do think it has to be more relative to the house size. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents, and then we can bet on whether the legislature will let us have fees on homelessness and all. I don't see that happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor O'Doherty. Councilor Richardson, please.
I'm just going to echo that I think a tiered system is probably more kind of equitable way to go about this. I'll also say that I think I'd push back a little bit on the stormwater being the same as like snow removal or that sort of thing, in the idea that the stormwater is really doing large-scale damage, and if we're not having a good drainage system, the snow that is there is the issue as it melts too, right? So this is more wide scale. It's not just to individual homeowners, it's to our infrastructure more broadly. And I think this is the best way, and yes, to Councilor Shumway's point of like trying to land this softly, but the best way to ensure that individuals aren't having to make major repairs to their homes by paying, $100 a year for that, for the safety down the road. And similarly to, not having our streets all torn up and not being able to get through 4 blocks of 3rd Street. So I'm in favor of this too, and I appreciate the efforts that have gone into it.
Thank you, Councilor. Vice Mayor.
Before I make my comment, I just want to say thank you to all of you. I think it's just mind-boggling that you do this and you put it together and present it to us in a way that we can work with it, and I appreciate it very much. And that's why my comment is that I asked the question about the fee and the residential, because so much of what we're doing is altering code to allow for smaller lots, to allow for affordable or more affordable, smaller houses. And so I think that to have a tiered kind of pay schedule encourages that as well. It offers a little reward for keeping it small, and if you want it big, then you gotta contribute accordingly. So I would be in favor of that too, and thank you very much for your work.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Well, I'm glad you all didn't let me skip comments. Those were, I appreciated them all. And sorry for trying to cut you off. Anything else, Council? All right, thank you all for your efforts. Sure appreciate it, and love the idea that a whole day is just toiling over grant predictions. So I appreciate sort of the tediousness of your jobs at times. Yeah, half a day, sorry. All right, well, thank you all. All right, we are going to move on from this work session, and council members, we're headed into updates and comments. We'll begin with let's see, is Councilor Sutton, with you, Councilor Doherty.
I don't have any updates, thank you.
Okay, Councilor Shumway. Councilor Pierce.
I don't have any, thank you.
Okay, the Pilot Hill Board met. They are full steam ahead on the new trailhead. I may have updated you on that before, but they are in the RFP process and are moving along. They also have a bunch of effort going into new trails this summer that hopefully you all will get a chance to get out on. Vice Mayor, I can rely on you for some updates.
I have minimal. Planning Commission did not meet yesterday because it was Memorial Day. And Laramie Beautification Committee did meet on Thursday and approved a match grant for Link Bike Shop, and they are going to put in a fabulous mural. So I saw the picture of it. It's a beautiful design, and they got a really good price on it, and so we're helping to fund that. And that's it.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilor Newman?
None.
Councilor Richardson?
Thank you. I met with both the DDA and Main Street. Main Street is planning, with the city's assistance, a citywide, how do you see parking in the city of Laramie? Kind of a personal perspective on parking and how people go about finding parking. Of course, Main Street's focus is on the downtown area, but I think there'll be some feedback generally for the city. DDA is putting out a survey just to get a sense of downtown businesses and where they are, what they would like to see happen in the downtown, that sort of thing. So both will be going out probably in the next couple weeks, I think.
Thank you, Councilor Richardson. Councilor Gabriel, anything from you?
Just remembered something.
Mayor, sorry. He did write me a text message or email that said he had no updates.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, Councilor Doherty, please.
I just remembered something that I think is of interest to everyone. I learned from the county treasurer that they're implementing similar software to our enterprise software that our staff has been working so diligently, and that our staff is helping, like they're working together. So it's another opportunity where city and county are working together, and I guess they're looking in to see if our modules can help them learn how to use the software. So I just think it's wonderful that, again, city and county can help save money by working together.
Councilor Doherty, I appreciate that update. Yeah, certainly that is, it's great when we all work together in the same direction. And I was just going to add one thing the city clerk pointed out earlier. If anybody has questions about municipal elections, you can find info at cityoflaramie.org/municipal elections, plural. All right, City Manager, do you have something?
Mayor, I just wanted to piggyback on Councilor Richardson's comment and give you the dates of the surveys. So the DDA survey, if everything goes according to plan, will be issued by the city on behalf of the Downtown Development Authority on June 4th. The survey sponsored by Laramie Main Street with regard to downtown parking preferences of the community and practices is intended to launch this Friday with a citywide distribution, and the city will sort of co-sponsor that because the data that we gather will inform your work session later in June. Also, the chief and I have been working and talking about the content of that downtown parking work session. He has an intern that he's engaged, and he and some other members of the department, along with the intern, are visiting downtown businesses to also hear directly from them about some of their parking concerns. One seems to be that there is a perception of no enforcement, which will bring you data to show you we are enforcing. But regardless of perception, we hope to gather people's real desires for parking downtown. So,
thank you, City Manager. I sure appreciate that. Any other updates, comments, council? Okay. Move on to agenda review. You've got your agenda before you. Plenty of proclamations and public hearings, so we'll have a bit of a slower start than usual. Wading through some of that, but some exciting stuff on the proclamations list. All right, any questions on that first part, or our shorter than usual consent agenda? Okay. All right, on to the regular agenda. You'll see we've got the budget coming for adoption. The finance team is pretty excited to get that over the finish line. And any other questions, council members? I guess I'll just leave it to you all to ask questions. And note the executive session. Okay. No questions? Okay. Well, thank you, council members. With that, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn us. We will see you all in a week.